and welcome back to How to Be a Shapeshifter podcast. Michelle and I today are talking about a phrase that has come up several times to both of us. Why does life feel so unstable right now? And it's quite depressing, actually, to think how many times it's come up. So how's that been affecting you, Michelle? It's great to see you.
Oh, well, it's great to see you, Liz, as always, a joy. I would say it's affected me personally. I've had a lot of clients who've come to see me for treatments who are really, really feeling a little bit out of sorts. Every time they find some kind of balance point, it seems to get shifted sideways. So I kind of think at the moment, finding your inner center is probably really important. And, I can attest to that because I felt like that as well. I'm very energy sensitive as the atmosphere around us heightens more and more. I think if you are energy sensitive, you do feel the shifts more in a more amplified way. And I've certainly been feeling that. So I've had to dig deep to kind of stabilize myself.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's interesting about this is even if you're not particularly a sensitive person, you probably can relate to the feelings in your body as if the rug's been pulled from underneath you, that you don't have any anchor in life, that perhaps rhythms that you were used to rely on are going. I think that on a global scale, with all the changes in the economy, the changes in politics, all of those things are adding to the sense that nothing quite feels like a reliable structure anymore. And as you say, turning inwards can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of taps a little bit into sort of, I know this sounds like a very deep subject, but human evolution and where we are at the moment. Much of our life up until now has been very kind of habitual or linear based on what has happened to us in the past and our experiences of that being projected into our future. So we become very fixed in our viewpoints about how life is. And if life suddenly starts to change, it's almost like we're not equipped to cope with that shifting scenery. And I think one of the things that's happening at the moment is that there is a quickening of the energy. If I had a penny for every person who said to me, I don't know what's happened to the week. It was Monday yesterday and now it's Friday and everything seems to have speeded up. The truth is, it is speeding up. We are moving into a slightly higher kind of calibration. And you have to be attentive to that, because if you're still trying to hold yourself down to an old way of being, you're going to feel very unsettled.
For sure. And I think it's useful to remember that I definitely feel this sense of time going much faster. And I have lost my sense of time entirely. And I find it very difficult. This is a different podcast, really, from the point of view of it's more about memory, because my memory about time is gone completely. But somebody said to me the other day, first of all, remember that time is a construct made by clockmakers. And I was like, whoa, that feels profound to me, that I've just been living by somebody else's construct. But then I was reading how, from the point of view of physics, time is a curve. And so, again, not a straight line. But what's, I think, from a physiological point of view, the nervous system, for me anyway, perceives that things are wrong in the environment, that things are not stable, but it doesn't really understand, well, is the crisis financial? Is it existential? Is it personal? Is it global? It doesn't really matter. My nervous system just goes, I can't deal with it. And because I'm quite a sensitive person like yourself, can be very empathic. If you're not careful, I think it's very easy to start thinking, well, climate change is my problem, and all of those things, and what's happening in Gaza is my problem, and of course they are, but it's really important to like control your nervous system, to say, well, what can I control and what can't I control, and just take control of the stuff that you can, rather than being overwhelmed by the rest.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a kind of linear time thing. I think our world has functioned on a linear schedule. You were talking about, when you look at the quantum side of things, that exists in no time. It's an infinite time. And as we move towards that, I mean, it's by no accident that scientists have now, physicists have started to have discovered the quantum field, even though our ancient predecessors were working with that kind of energy anyway. We've now given it validity. And that's because they actually can see, I think, or feel that the frequencies are moving upwards. Now, the thing in terms of just personal stability, I think it's microcosm, macrocosm. So basically, all the stuff that's going on around us externally is going to be impactful on us, because we are attuned to that. At the moment, unfortunately, we're too tuned towards fight and flight. And that's because a lot of our biological world is reactive to the outside world. And so we tend to be in a much more heightened state of, it's called beta, really. And beta is very much to do with fight and flight, and, oh, this is happening, that is happening. And because we're all scrolling at the moment, and we watch TV and we watch the news, and all of that feeds into that anxiety. So as you said earlier on, yeah, it's not really control. You just need to find that balance point that is right for you. Because I think when you try to control something, it puts pressure on you. But I think when you start to tune in with your heart to what sort of activities or what sort of things, so something simple like box breathing is one of the simplest ways to just get your vagus nerve back into balance. Sighing, I often suggest to my clients before they start doing breath work or meditation, take about 5 or 6 sighs just to regulate your nervous system. Because before, sighing used to be seen as a sort of weakness, sort of almost like a reaction that things weren't going right. But if you actually sigh, just breathe in and go, you'll feel your shoulders and your neck and everything release, so that when you go into that stabilizing exercises, you do it more quickly.
I think for sure. And I think it's interesting to really engage with these breathing practices and things that have been known for eons and eons and eons, and using those, like implementing those with inhalations of essential oils to really anchor us, because they really do work as emotional anchors or ways to move you forward. And I think a key sort of skill in managing these times is being able to sit and think, actually, how do I feel and how do I want to feel? Because sometimes, you're so in your body or so in your head and divorced from your body that you can feel that your body feels really kind of wired, but you don't actually know what's going on, because, like I say, the nervous system can't identify what is happening. So a lovely practice that I learned in my priestess work was to breathe in and say, this is how I'm changing. This is how I stay the same. And just this I am changing, I am staying the same, is really quite centering work.
Yeah.
I always like to look back at old philosophers as a way of checking in with the processes of my thought, because I'm aware that I think in a certain way. I surround myself with people who think similarly to me, and now we have the algorithm which is geared to always give you back to what you like are interested in. It will always give you the same. So I always like to look back at old philosophers and think, well, what did they have to say about that? And what's interesting is if you look back at sort of around about 400 500 BC, there was the collapse of the city states. They had what were called the polis, so everybody was sort of run by regional kings. It all started, well, a bit like a honeycomb. It all started to break down, and then democracy started to come in. At the same time, the Romans were starting to take hold, and they were listening to what was happening in ancient Greece and moulding things. So it was quite a politically charged time. People didn't have much food. There was a lot of famine. The sort of big authorities of the time were big dictators, making big changes, making big waves in the world. So we're going back like 2,500 years, and it kind of feels the same time, which is really interesting to me. And one of my favorite philosophers is a man called Heraclitus, or Heraclitus, depending on how you say his name. And he was fundamentally fascinated with the idea of fire, which I am also interested in fire. But he was interested in fire as an agent of change. And he was quite a bit of a it's a bit of a miserable sod, really. They called him the weeping philosopher. He's often depressed, and he has struggled a lot with his mental health, I think. And but what he said was that actually you can try and predict as many things as you like in life, but actually the only fundamental constant in the universe is change. And so his philosophy was, if you can embrace change, if you can learn how to go with the flow, then you are working with the universe in a much better way. And it seems quite a healthy viewpoint to me at this time, where things are really changing a lot, to kind of say, well, okay. He famously said, you can never step into the same river twice, which I absolutely love, that sort of image. But if you can find ways of going, right, okay, things are changing. I'm changing all of the time. Eventually I will die, and I'll have that change of state. There's no putting that off. We're all moving forward all of the time. So if you can meditate on the idea that you are always changing in this time of change, then suddenly actually everything adds up a lot better. And so I like to really engage with this idea of change with essential oils. And one that I find really helpful is neroli or neroli. I just find that so I do this breathing of, this is how I'm changing. This is how I stay the same. This is how I'm changing. This is how I stay the same. And of course, the chemical structure of neroli, apart from all of the vibrational aspect, is to really calm the nervous system. It really calms the anxiety at the same. But it's very good oil for the idea of I'm manifesting something new. I'm manifesting my destiny. And so, like, almost like the idea of the goo. A friend of mine calls it the goo in the chrysalis. Eventually you'll come out somewhere different, but at the moment we're in the chrysalis. It's tight, it's difficult, and neroli just goes, okay. And I like the image that it is a blossom, not quite the fruit yet, but it's the prettiest part. So I think that's useful.
It's possibly one of my favorite oils, actually. I love neroli. I mean, I think, what you're saying is also, if you think of, if you do mantras, and Buddhism is all about being in the moment. And I think, I was talking about our linear world. We've been educated to have structure in our world. And this is a time of where you need to be a little bit more fluid. I mean, have some basic structures in terms of eating and sleeping and bathing and stuff like that. They're your little full stops. But actually, as you said, it's about being much more present in the moment and actually not trying to preempt what is going to happen. And what we have been taught to do is almost to be prepared for the future. And actually, at the moment, it's about the unfolding. And just in, you were saying about your meditation. I did a workshop this weekend, and one of the things I told them was a very simple mantra that you can say when you're doing breath work, which is called so hum. So hum means I am. And so you breathe in so, and you breathe out hum. And it's just like when you are really spinning, just coming back to that very simple statement that I am here. This is where I am. This is where I'm centered. And I find quite a lovely oil. And I do think it gets a little bit of bad press, but something like patchouli, which is very linked to the earth, Gaia. It is a wonderful oil when you're spinning out of kilter, to just bring you back to a kind of sense of presence in your center. And I think diluting it rather than smelling the pure scent actually diffuses it more and allows you to journey with it a little bit more. But yes, I think for me, it's probably the more grounding side, whereas I think for me, neroli is like the stroking side. It just really kind of does, for me, that's when I use neroli, when someone really just needs that beautiful stroke, and that it's a mother stroke, it's going to be okay. Whereas for me, patchouli is much more connecting to where we are in the earth at that moment.
I always say that patchouli brings your energy down from your head into your body, as you say.
It does.
So grounding. And if your mind is spinning out, it is just really fast medicine.
Well, it's interesting because I was reading about it a couple of days ago, and it's particularly good if you do high frequency energy work, or if you're meditating a lot. It brings you back down to earth, literally, but not with a thump. It kind of cajoles you back down to earth. And it's also very good for people who maybe are rehabilitating from taking lots of drugs or things like that. It kind of brings you into a kind of more focused state.
Yeah, for sure. Another philosophy quote. There's quite a lot of the different schools in the ancient world believed in a property called Ataraxia, which was untroubledness. And depending on the school of thought, then it meant different things. But overall, it meant freedom from disturbance. And so different schools of thoughts went at it from different points of view. So, for example, Pyrrhonism would say, well, that disturbance comes when people decide to take a side or make a judgment out of things. They would say, well, actually, anything that you can't know anything that's happening in the future. And so therefore, suspend doubt, suspend judgment. And as soon as you decide, well, I'm not going to pick a side, I'm not going to make a judgment, I'm not going to make an assumption about that, then therefore your nervousness can't take control. And so you remain in a passive place of, I'm just going to watch what happens, which is quite similar to Buddhism, isn't it? It's kind of like non-attachment.
Yeah, it just makes me smile, this, because there's such a synergy between all of these things, and they've been out there for so long.
Yeah, exactly. They just come up over, they just get rethought over and over. It's
Yeah.
fascinating, isn't it? Because 2,500 years later, we would say, oh, we're living in exceptional times. But if you look back, you would say, okay, different names. Actually, the problems are very, very similar. Um, so the Stoics, who is like Marcus Aurelius, we most of us know that, he would say, well, so Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, and he was ruling at a time where there was just huge amounts of famine. So can you imagine how difficult that must have been? The external sort of influences to him were, huge, and he said, well, actually, you have power over your mind, but not over outside events. And so if you realize this, then you will find strength. And he says that sort of freedom from disturbance comes from aligning with reason and with nature. So not so much allowing your thoughts and emotions to carry away with you, but to center yourself by looking at nature, and to just kind of, he liked to say, if you tend your own vine, and then if everybody tended their own vine in the world, there would be such a more beautiful, peaceful, passive place with so much more for everybody to eat, which I always thought was fascinating too.
Yeah, but I mean, in another way, that's just saying you need to connect with your higher self. And the
Mm-hmm.
way you connect with, and sitting in nature and being in the sun suddenly starts to activate that sense of relaxation and stillness that allows you to connect with that. So it's really beautiful. I actually sort of did some work on him a little while ago. And there's also Epicurus, who,
Epicurus, yeah.
everybody kind of thinks that it's all to do with food, but it's actually to do with the enjoyment of everything you do in life, isn't it? It's being present with absolutely everything you do. Yeah, I had one of those headways, so I was kind of learning about all of these,
Yeah, well, I think it's really valid. So I think one of the reasons why it's like linked with Epicurean was because Epicurus said that his favorite thing in the world, the thing that gave him most peace, was friendships, and it was
That's
best
right.
enjoyed with cheese and wine, which is how we get to the Epicurean.
Conviviality.
Yeah.
I love that word. And I don't think we have enough conviviality in our lives anymore. That just coming together and being and talking, we've become a little bit isolated. And I think
Hmm.
that's something that, I realized for myself, earlier last year. I just kind of thought, I need to be inside a community. I need to sort of have some laughter and joy, because life was getting a bit linear. I was tending to go from work to, I'd have meetings and stuff and see people, but there wasn't this kind of camaraderie or this conviviality. And for me, I ended up, because I love singing, I joined a choir, and being in that group, and I particularly chose something that was a little looser and a little less structured, because I had been in like quite a formal choir. And I have to say, it's been one of the most joyous things. And I really look forward to it on a Monday, because it's this one moment where the community grabs you and holds you, and you'll all laugh together. It's like a group energy. And I suspect in this time that we're talking about, we need some of that. It's like the in breath and the out breath, isn't it? We need those moments, like Stoicism says, to be centered and to connect with your higher self and your the nature that surrounds you. And then there are those moments where you expand with the out breath, if you like, into the greater group, but do that with joy and conviviality, not in aggression and not with conflict. And I think at the moment our outer world is so full of conflict, because people feel just a little bit disenfranchised. They don't know where they stand with anything. It's a struggle to to make ends meet. Everything is spiraling out of control, not for the very wealthy, but certainly for your average person.
Mm, mm.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of stress about how am I going to make things manage, and I think when you have all of those thoughts, lots of scattered thoughts bombarding you, for me, I find sweet basil is a fantastic oil for bringing that sort of sense of one pointedness, that sense of clarity. I think it's just brilliant in the sense of when you have got all these scattered ideas that you're trying to process, to maybe sort of just narrow it all in. And the other thing I would suggest, which is a practice that I've done for, oh my gosh, probably 25 years, is I did this thing called morning pages, which I started when I did Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. So I've continued to use it, and I actually pass it on to my patients as well. And it's just literally taking three A4 pages and literally dumping everything that is scattered in your mind. So it's not about sentence structure. It's not about spelling. It's not about you going to read it again. It's about really getting all the things that you don't say, all the fears, all the worries, all the things you edit, even when you're talking to dear ones that you obviously love, but you still spare their feelings, and maybe they've upset you. And it's like releasing that scattered toxicity onto a page, into form. And with my patients, I say, if you don't want it hanging around the house, just burn it afterwards. But I don't care. I've chucked so many books out with these because they're so fragmented. Nobody would make head nor tail of what I'm talking about because it jumps about from all over the place. But it's an amazing practice because you do feel so much freer. And what I've noticed is over maybe 10 days of people doing it regularly, they suddenly start to get more inspiration because their mind isn't cluttered up with all this confusion. Sorry,
Yeah.
I went off on one there. Sorry, I do find it
You did, because I've got about three. I'm going back 3 threads back, but that's all right. I loved it and I learned, and that was always beautiful for me. But I'm thinking about the word conviviality. That is one of my mum's favourite words. So I can tell you that she has a specific oil for convivial atmospheres.
Oh, does she?
And that is Mandarin. She always says
Oh,
it chatters like Raffles, is what she says. Tea at Raffles. So that's lovely. But in terms of
is
oils,
that so sorry, I'm just going to ask you, was that ordinary Mandarin or green Mandarin?
so that's a good question because she did work with red, yellow, and green. I'm thinking probably green Mandarin, but I couldn't say
Yeah, no,
before.
I get that. When you said Raffles, I thought it needed to be a more sort of um limier side of Mandarin.
I mean, I do think that the citrus family is helpful at these times. It's so uplifting, and it's light energy. We were talking about how the energy is raising, and it has that light energy. So it's worth, like, going back to what I said before, working out how do I feel, how do I want to feel, to become more nebulous, if you like, lighter and able to go with the flow, up top notes, to bring yourself down and ground yourself, base notes. But one of my favorite oils, I always think that this is such a funny conundrum, really. So as a child, my mum was like a real staunch feminist, and there were very strong things that we were allowed to do and not allowed to do. So she put this enormous picture of the map of the world in my bedroom because that's what Rose Kennedy had done for her sons, and it's a sense of consistent disappointment to her that my geography is appalling. but we were never allowed to watch Doris Day because Doris Day was just like in her 50s, in her apron. She was against everything that my mum believed in. Consequently, I love Doris Day films.
Yeah. James Garner and Doris Day.
Exactly. And Brett Maverick, there's a name. What was I going to say? Doris Day. So
Doris Day.
when I'm working with chamomile, after having my mind completely brainwashed that everything about Doris Day is bad, chamomile sings to me and goes, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be."
I love that.
That's what happens. Whatever will be, will be. And it's just like this lovely energy. It's like the stalk in the little head in the breeze. It is just the most beautiful imagery. And I just think it's so funny that everything one was against, the oil just goes, no, this is what you're supposed to do. Yeah, so this idea of going with the flow of whatever will be very much chamomile, and it doesn't matter which chamomile really, but the one that I like most that people rarely speak of because it's not really chamomile, but chamomile Maroc, I absolutely love, or Manus morticalis. I think it's just the most tranquilizing oil, so serene, like I don't care what happens, I'm just going to watch the clouds. It's just the loveliest energy.
Do you know, I used to use chamomile a lot, in my formulas and in my practice, maybe about, I don't know, 15 years ago. And then I just stopped using it. And it's only recently it's popped back on my radar. And I don't know why that was, but I suspect it was probably to do with the mental state I was in. I was probably charging too much, like charging ahead too much. And, I, again, when I was doing this workshop, I said, don't ignore the oils that you have a resistance to, because sometimes they are going to teach you the biggest lesson. And, it's funny, I was blending with chamomile yesterday and suddenly it's okay. It's a really beautiful smell again. But for a while, I just really could not sort of resonate with it. So we do flow in and out of liking certain oils, don't we?
I think several things probably are happening there. So first of all, you change, and so your relationship with the
Yeah,
oil changes.
yeah,
Your resonances are different, and they can jar. So
yeah, yeah.
it's a bit like trying to go shopping with your nan sometimes, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You just want to go quicker. She just doesn't want to go fast enough.
Yeah,
But also, of course, the oils develop, they evolve, and so they don't necessarily feel the same at all times, do they? So I think it's
no,
important in a way to not always impact an oil and think this is how it's always going to work, because when you're working in this vibration where you're like really engaging with the spirit of the plant and the spirit of the land, then it will be different. Of course it will be different.
absolutely. I mean, I really love English chamomile actually, and I think it's got quite a high acetylene level. But I just find it's the same with the English lavender. There's a real softness to both of those, and I'm trying to kind of figure out, why that is. Because, say, if you get something like a lavender that comes from Bulgaria or Croatia, it's quite harsh. It's quite a
Mhm.
hard lavender to cope with, whereas the British lavender's got this kind of roundness, and the same with the chamomile. There's a more floral note to it. Whereas I find with Maroc, which I do love, it's a little bit musky on the end for me. But again, that's not to say I won't like it now. So what I'm going to do is get all my chamomiles out and have a little bit of a smelling session and really sort of see, understand where I went with that. But it is interesting. We all sort of I suppose that's like, it just shows you, what you were saying right at the beginning, the power of these oils at certain points, and if you're using them to stabilize yourself, you know, that resonance you have with it in the moment will either pull you down, or it'll either lighten you up, or it'll sit in your heart. But the one thing that I've really heard a lot in the last probably 6 months or more than that, a couple of years, it's about this heart center. this is where we need to come from. You know, we've been using the mental mind and the gut reaction too much, and we've lost our ability to discern. And when you go into the heart, it tempers both of those aspects of ourselves. And if you think of the vagus nerve, it goes all the way from the head down into the gut, but it goes through the heart and the solar plexus. So I think it's very, very key when you're working with these oils now is to tune into your heart and how your heart resonates with it. Because I think the heart is a very untapped resource. You know, I think a lot of people have gone so far into their heads that they've lost their connection with their heart.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
And I think it's just something that's very key to the whole subject we're talking about, because I think kindness is a very important word here. Kindness to yourself and kindness to others. And in that kindness, that means having compassion and patience with what's going on. So it's not running to that clockwork timetable that we're used to, you know, the outer world calls us to do. You know, do you remember when they got rid of things like your answer phone, and we've got mobile phones and people could get you anytime, day or night. So you didn't even have that disconnect of being able to go home and saying, well, who left a message for me? Oh, I'll answer them, but I'm going to leave that to tomorrow. We don't do that. So people sort of before, I think, lockdown and a bit earlier than that, just got into racing. They were just available all the time. You must have had this. I had clients who were going home, feeding the children, and then working till about midnight after they'd had dinner. And wondering why they couldn't sleep, wondering why they couldn't get into deep repair, you know.
Agreed, absolutely agreed. And I think social media is just a nightmare for it, isn't it? I get messages sometimes at 30:30 because it's across time zones. I quite often get messages arrive at like 11:30 at night. People are saying, "Can you do this for me?" I had one at 11:30 on Sunday night this week, and I had to say, can you not do this, please? Because you go to bed with it in your head, don't you? But I think that you brought me very nicely to an oil that I really wanted to talk about, which is cardamom, which is so good for saying to you, just sit down and look how far you've come. In a world and a time where it really does feel like, well, let's go back to Heraclitus river. You feel like you're walking upstream sometimes. No matter what you do, you're just always fighting everything that's coming back at you. You can feel like you're getting nowhere. But I think that Cardamon's so good at just saying, just sit down, be comfortable, just assess, look at the stars, take a breath. If you really think about it, you've come a lot further than you think. And I think that is really helpful medicine.
I love cardamom. I really do. And I think what you've just said, it really resonates with me, because I think we don't spend enough time giving ourselves a pat on the shoulder. We're constantly benchmarking ourselves to what the next thing is that we have to do, rather than actually where we are, which goes back to being in the moment, doesn't it? It's all about stop trying to pre-plan your future, stop looking into the past and carrying through pain and suffering and hurts into your present. Just recognize where you are now and what you're doing and who you are and who are the people you want to have around you that nurture that.
Agreed. I think I would really say to people, at least once a day or probably twice a day, sit down with an oil, 5 minutes. It feels like you're doing a practice with an essential oil. No, you're not. What you're doing is stabilizing your nervous system. You're stabilizing your hormones. You're really helping your mental health and your physical health exponentially. Just take 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, just to design the day, if you like, and to switch the day off. I think it would make such a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it just reminded me. There's an oil that I really love called Elemi, and I don't think many people know about Elemi. I mean, I think as an aromatherapist, you will, but it's such an ancient oil, but it's very good for passages of time. It really helps you when you're trying to make transitions in your life, and it's got this beautiful sort of soft, grassy resiny. It is a resin, but it has got this kind of grassiness, this greenness to it, in a different way to frankincense. I think it's a very for me. I think it really helps you surrender a little bit more. I think it's one of those oils that really helps you to stop for a second and surrender. And through that surrendering, you stop the chatter, you stop the doing, and you start being a little bit more. And when you're being, that's, when you start actually acknowledging where you are, what you've done, what you've achieved, what joys you have. One of the exercises I often, there's a lot of talk about gratitude in our world, and doing your gratitude meditations. And I do them every night. But, what changed about my gratitude was really having gratitude for the small thing, like the fact that you're breathing, that you have fingers and toes, that you can walk out in the morning and it's not a struggle, that you have sunshine, that you have nature. And we forget, we're always looking for the house, the car, the next dress, the next whatever holiday, and we forget that there are some very simple fundamental things that are just there for free, that we just completely take for granted.
I think that is a beautiful note to end on.
Thank you. I agree.
Yeah. So, if life is feeling very unstable now, I hope that you will engage in some of the practices that we've suggested, and all of our details are in the show notes below. So, don't hesitate to get in touch with either of us if you think that we can help you. Say bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.